once there is a data breach, there's a loss of reputation. And to build that reputation is a big task in itself.
Absolutely. So the attacker launches a ransomware only after he or she or whoever the threat actor is has exfiltrated all the data from the company, which means the customer data is already gone. It's already in the dark web. And before the company realizes they have a ransomware attack. So they are trying to deal with the ransomware attack and they don't even know that the entire data is gone. If there is a breach, then they have multiple regulators to answer, multiple clients to answer, and the customer trust, which once, like you said, once eroded, it's very difficult.
We all need innovation.
Yeah.
And for innovation, through AI, we need data to be shared. At the same time, we do not want the data breach to happen to us. We have seen a lot of digitization and upgradation on the processes by the companies. The recent digitization has improved and re-engineered the processes, the way the organizations function, the way the data is secured, the way the data is managed, and how it disseminates to the team for, obviously, the revenue generation. But that comes in with a lot of responsibilities, a lot of measures that need to be taken on the data protection. That is why today we are here on our podcast series, Digital Frontlines, where we discuss one of a very stringent act, DPDP, or the Digital Data Protection Act 2023. Today we have with us Mr. Dhananjaya, who's the CISO at CISO 360. Welcome to the show, Dhananjaya.
Thank you, Amitabh. Fantastic to be here.
Thank you so much. So, Dhananjaya, before we start, can you help us understand what CISO 360 is? What exactly do you do?
So CISO 360 was born in Australia. Okay. So the CISO 360 as a company is headquartered in Melbourne, and we have operations in Middle East and the European region as well as in India. So we primarily focus in the consulting and advisory side of things, and we help clients address their challenges with regard to cybersecurity risks, data protection risks, data governance, some of the cutting edge advisory services that we do. We work with a lot of large clients, both in India as well as around the world.
Okay. So while, at Policybazaar for Business, we do offer our clients the proactive and the reactive measures. The reactive one is obviously the cyber insurance, where if tomorrow there is a data breach, how you are protected, how the balance sheet is protected.
Absolutely.
But very nice to have you and have this conversation where we are talking more on the proactive measures as to what the client's organization should do to make sure that that breach does not happen and that data is protected in an adequate manner, in a proper manner, so that tomorrow there are no liabilities coming on it.
Absolutely.
Can you help us understand what is the DPDP Act 23?
So we need to take a step back, because, DPDP as an act was introduced in India by the Indian Parliament in 2023. But prior to that, what was the necessity for this, right? Because if you look at the global scenario, have the European Union that has GDPR. In America, you have the CCPA, which is the California Privacy Act. Then you have the Australian Privacy Act itself in Australia. And similar acts are in China, in other parts of Europe. They have their own in-country acts as well to protect data. So considering all this, the Indian Parliament realized that it is quite the time to introduce a privacy act which meets the current requirements of the industry and the growth that Indian industry is seeing and the amount of data, because the data becomes the crux, as I said, of every organization, and how the data needs to be handled, how it has to be managed eventually. Indian Parliament felt the need, and that's when they brought in this very dynamic DPDP Act, which focuses on the digitization process that's happening in India across all the companies. At the same time, it also focuses on how customers' interests can be protected. So that's kind of where DPDP comes into place.
Sure. Okay, then if this is a new act, what's the difference between the GDPR and the DPDP Act right now?
Now with DPDP, it is customized to the Indian requirement. Yes, it has components of what we see in GDPR, like, for example, consent management
Yeah.
is a classic example,
Yes.
right? It's there very much embedded into GDPR. We'll see similar things in DPDP as well. So there are, you can say in a way that terminologies that we use in GDPR
Yeah.
is slightly different to terminologies that we use in DPDP.
But does that mean that the organizations, how they are managing the data, how they're sharing the data, and how they're securing the data, they need to make some changes because of this act? Or what's the implication on the business because of this now? Because I believe the framework on how the act will operate is still under preparation. It's expected to be out in 2025. But till then, are there any steps, any tools that are available which the organizations can use?
It's a very good question, actually, because if you think about it, organizations that have been typically dealing with multinationals, they are kind of already used to the requirements that is set across by these multinationals. And what I mean by that is, if a multinational is operating in UK, for example, if one of the clients or that the Indian company deals with is operating in UK already has UK GDPR, UK version of the GDPR.
Yes.
So the Indian entity already has to comply with the requirements of UK GDPR and demonstrate that they are protecting the customer data, which is related to the EU citizens. There is a similarity in that sense.
Sure.
In how DPDP has been structured. But when it comes to tools, when it comes to thinking about what can help an organization, it's nothing out of the ordinary, but then it's being more proactive than reactive. So when we talk of reactive, we talk about having cyber insurance and those kind of
the risk mitigation tools that they have.
Correct, and which I understand Policybazaar is big into it, right? Cyber insurance and the likes of it. But then there are areas where the companies can be more proactive in being compliant with DPDP, even though it's not officially, the rubber has not met the road yet. Sure. What I mean is the government has not started cracking down yet, on companies. But still, from a proactive measure point, they can use the existing tools. There are standards and frameworks that I know for sure that lots of Indian companies, having dealt with plenty of them, dealing with plenty of them, we see that they are already implementing, certain other standards that are.
Can you help us with an example as to what changes they're doing? Because if it's a multinational company, maybe having a US parentage or a UK parentage, they may still have some of the systems in place, which they'll be implementing it for managing the data in India. But if it's a new company or if it's an Indian multinational, are there any tools, any things that they can use to make sure they comply to the DPDP Act? As well as also, because complying to the Act is one part of it, the other is actually protecting the consumer data.
Yes.
Because once there is a data breach, there's a loss of reputation. And to build that reputation is a big task in itself.
Absolutely. I think there are tools like consent management tools, which companies can actually start incorporating. And I know plenty of these Indian multinationals have already started incorporating it, because not just to comply with DPDP, but also they have an obligation under
the
their
international
contracts with their international clients.
Yes.
Right. And there are other tools like, being aware of the risks around handling customer data, being aware of what are the requirements around incident management. If there is a data breach, like you mentioned the word data breach, but that's a very core topic in itself. Because when there is a data breach, how do organizations manage that? There is a requirement within DPDP, as well as if you look at the other global data protection acts, around stringent requirements around how data breaches are handled. Companies need to inform the authority, the data protection authority within the country, within a stipulated time, within 72 hours, within 48 hours. Different countries have different requirements.
It has a predefined actions to be taken after a data breach has happened?
Absolutely. So
just to add, if there are predefined, then are there tools, or can CISO 360 also help them define and design a BCP tomorrow if there is a data breach? And how do we assess that?
And so what we do is we help plenty of clients in defining their entire business continuity management, including BCP, crisis management, incident response plans, disaster
Any
recovery plans.
forensics also that you do?
Digital forensics as well. We do
Okay.
have capability in the DFIR space,
Sure.
the digital forensics and incident response. So when an incident occurs, to the resolution of the incident, there is a whole lot of activity that happens. So between the incident occurring and the company getting to know that there's been an incident, there is a requirement to inform the authority, the in-country authority, that there has been a breach.
And now it's more stringent because of the DPDP Act as to where to inform and how soon to inform the authorities.
Absolutely. So there is 72 hours in which, GDPR says 72 hours, and DPDP Act has a similar requirement with regard to by when they need to inform the in-country authority around the data breach itself, and also inform the authority on what proactive measures were in place before the breach occurred. So that is something that we help as an entity to put those proactive measures in place, so that the company, that will need to, in case there is a data breach, when they need to report to the authorities, they have to also submit a report on what were the proactive measures that they had already taken before a breach occurred. Because as the saying goes, a data breach or a security incident is not, it's not if, or it's a matter of when it will happen.
Yeah,
because
it will happen. When it will happen, we do not know.
Correct, absolutely. And we have seen lots of multinationals go through this, big names in the industry. It's all there, out on the internet. I don't need to exclusively call out those names, but big multinationals have gone through this, and they're still continuing to go through this.
From the insurance standpoint, yes, there is a tool that's available, which is a cyber insurance, where we do cover our clients for any kind of the data breaches that may happen, the data recovery cost, the data protection cost, the forensic cost, and likes. Where we see help is the DPDP Act specifies that there is a capping of about 250 crores as a penalty that's there, which is a fine. Now, a fine in an insurance policy is not payable unless it is permitted by a law.
Yep.
And that's an upper capping of 250 crores. How do one assess the limit of liability they should buy? Because finally, it's a limit that the client buys. It can be a $5 million, $10 million, $20 million kind of a thing.
Correct.
How do we assess that if tomorrow there is a breach, this is a kind of liability that will come on us?
Great question, because recently we helped one of the clients in Middle East, assess what their liability has to be. What is the coverage they should look at? Right. So everything starts from the data. It goes back to that point of data. What data do they handle? And what kind of obligations, client obligations do they have? Third-party obligations.
Is it the contracts that they have signed?
Yes, absolutely. Because the contracts have liabilities in them. If there is a data breach and if the particular client's data is affected, then there is a liability that the company has to bear. So that directly links to what is the cyber insurance liability they should be looking at. So the bigger their liabilities on the other end, on the client side, it will have an impact on the cyber insurance liability as well. So it's all interconnected.
Can you elaborate more as to how do you assess that liability?
Yeah.
How do you assess that quantum of liability that can come through? Because the data can be of different nationalities. It can impact different regions. It can impact the reputation of a company.
Yes.
So how do we, if you could just elaborate a bit on this?
It's not just about the data in itself or the contracts that they have, which have liabilities in them. It's also the liability that they carry with regard to the regulators, with those different jurisdictions that they operate in. Because those regulators will hold the company accountable when there is a breach. And those regulators will dive deep. I can give a classic example. What happened with British Airways? Right, British Airways had a breach, and they lost personal information of their flyers for 10-15 years. The people who had been flying with them, including passport details, all other identification information. Which is, if you think of as an individual, for me it affects a lot. Right, if my passport is out there in the dark web, and someone can use it to spoof my identity and raise money or take loans whatever, do any
They can
kind of
identify,
criminal.
they can establish an
Correct.
identity.
So as part of the UK GDPR implication, the UK courts actually ended up fining British Airways around 20 million euros.
Yeah.
That is a lot of money if you think about it, right? If British Airways had done the right thing, they would have been better off investing upfront some money into protecting the data than actually ending up paying a huge fine.
Sure.
And so that's like a classic example of what can happen. So when companies look at their cyber insurance, what liabilities they should be thinking about, they should keep all these parameters in mind, because if there is a breach, then they have multiple regulators to answer, multiple clients to answer, and the customer trust, which once, like you said, once eroded, it's very difficult to get back. Very difficult.
But digitization, the IT space, the tech space is changing, and it's now not specific only to the IT companies. It's spread across all the industries.
Yes.
Can precedents help decide the future course of action, or is it just that we have an incident, we know that, okay, we are even not secure, we need to take some protections and then move forward? How would the precedents help decide what's to be done next?
I think that's a very important question, that when organizations think of their data protection strategies, they should think of this specific question that you put across. Because precedence is one thing, because then that gives a bit of enlightenment into what has actually happened before. But when we see from a technology point, because technology is a crux of all companies. No company can claim that they are not linked to technology. And the majority of the companies have now started incorporating technologies like AI, and which is playing completely different role. And many of the companies still don't understand how that is actually impacting. One example I can give you is, and this information is out in the open. There's no IP with this information. When the OpenAI came in the beginning, one of the large mobile phone developers, right, mobile phone manufacturers, the software development team of the company wanted to test out their software, the piece of code that they had written, and they put it on ChatGPT, OpenAI, right, and using OpenAI, and then they wanted to see the output. They got the output, but they didn't realize, because it is OpenAI and someone else in another part of the world queried the same question to ChatGPT, and actually their code, which is a proprietary code, was sent
leaked
to them, was leaked to them. Right, and this was inadvertent, but then that was also lack of knowledge or lack of awareness. But this is what AI can do. So these are things that, one is to think of precedents, and then next is to prepare to what is to come. So what is to come is there's AI, there is quantum. So,
since it's changing too rapidly.
Yeah.
So even you talk about AI, or we talk about the newer tools that are coming in.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to cope up with such changes, and we do not anticipate as to what will happen, because everything comes as a surprise.
Indeed.
So is there something that we can do where we can simulate the kind of things that can happen, things that can go wrong, how it will function, how will it impact the company? Because the most important is safeguarding the data.
Yeah.
And secondly, if there is a breach, how do you safeguard the reputation of the company?
In cybersecurity and data protection, there is a concept, or there's a requirement that we put across, and we have helped lots of clients in this, is to build playbooks, right? What playbooks do is help the organization be prepared for such situations. Like if there is a data breach, what kind of data breach is it? So do we write playbooks for different...
we define as to what different data breaches are there.
Correct.
And then we look into as to what can go wrong if this particular sequence of events happen.
Correct. Absolutely. So if you take classic case of ransomware, right? If there's a ransomware attack. So ransomware attack normally is not just a ransomware attack. So if someone has to launch a ransomware attack, there are multiple ways that they do it. They normally send phishing email and someone clicks on it. That's a classic way of doing it.
Yeah.
Then there are
traditional way. Now maybe AI will bring in some new methods to do.
Correct. So now other thing, what lots of instances we have seen, we have helped clients manage in the DFIR space when they call us, is when there is a ransomware attack, normally we have seen in majority of the cases, it is also linked to a lot of data exfiltration that happens. So the attacker launches a ransomware only after he or she or whoever the threat actor is has exfiltrated all the data from the company.
Sure.
Right. So which means the customer data is already gone. It's already in the dark web. And before the company realizes they have a ransomware attack. So they are trying to, deal with a ransomware attack, and they don't even know that the entire data is gone.
Sure.
Right. And so we have seen these plenty of times happening. And obviously, there is, with a ransomware attack, there's a demand by the threat actor that you pay X amount of dollars, or you pay these many bitcoins for the purpose of releasing the data, or providing solution to the ransomware. But there is what we call as these playbooks, which are really critical, that organizations need to have them in place. The incident response playbooks, which actually help them deal with if and when such a situation arises, then they know what has to be done, who has to do what, and who do they need to call, and when do they need to act on these. These are the things that will definitely help organizations.
So Dhananjaya, help us understand. With this every company is talking about AI. They're implementing a lot of things in AI. They want to work on this. Can you help us with an example as to how it actually impacts? Because the data is being used to inference a lot of things, but how do we secure it, and how does it really impact? If you could just help us with an example.
What is happening? How do we see AI? Right? Organizations, how do they see AI? AI is a necessary evil. That's how I would put it, because it's already crept in. 2 years ago, people were talking about, or companies, were talking about in their strategy that the next 5 years we'll do this with AI, next 10 years we'll do this with AI. But now, suddenly, if you see in 2 years, they are doing everything with AI.
Yes.
There's no longer 5 years, 10 years roadmap.
Right.
They've already...
And it has caught up much earlier than what we were expecting.
Correct. Exactly. And that's the thing with technology, right? Even when cloud came in, that's how it was. People were reluctant. They were like, no, we're not going to move to cloud. But now everything works on cloud. The best part is now AI is also integrated with cloud. So you know where it is going, right? It's technology. You're going to see the same when it comes to... I'll just slightly deviate from your question. When we come to quantum as well, we're going to see the same thing. Because there's already solutions that we are working with some clients.
So as a layman, what's the difference between AI and quantum?
Okay, it's completely different. The technologies are fully different. And quantum talks about how fast processing can be done, by implementing the quantum solutions, and how we can implement quantum to even protect data. We can do that. But AI is more around enabling processes or building new solutions. So is it like
a self-learning tool? AI learns from what you, as a layman, what we understand is, as much as you use AI, it learns from you and then throws it back at you as to what is the best option. Would that be a right definition?
Yeah, in a way, yes. Because if you think of large language models, what they do, they learn. The fundamental concept behind AI is your machine learning. So that machine learning is what it is, and then AI is your front, because then AI algorithms using the large language model crunch the information that they have learned over a period of time or from different sources, and then present it to you based on your queries. How strong your queries are, how strong your prompts are, and that is what we see in classic examples of ChatGPT, or Grok. Or Google Gemini, any of these. You take example of any of these, or Microsoft Copilot. That's what they do.
But if we look at specifically, just so that it is more easier for all of us to understand, say we pick up a e-commerce company or maybe a healthcare sector. So from implementation, because right now the healthcare sector, if we specifically talk about, has a lot of health data of people. Whether somebody goes into a hospital for a general physician checkup or gets admitted, there's a lot of details that goes into it. So this is a sector where we see personal data being there, and that can be used on multiple things for companies who want to actually market the products, market the medicines, market the way that data is being used and develop maybe the medicines, or could be anything. So how would this impact? So from securing of the data till a actual use of that data, or maybe a breach of that data, and how it can impact a particular sector.
So, AI playing a big role in this space, right?
Okay.
If you think of healthcare, particularly, healthcare is also linked to pharmacy, and to protect this data is very important. That's where when it comes to technology, they talk a lot about IP. Protecting the intellectual property. Intellectual property can also be related to the kind of algorithms they're using in their technology solutions, as far as AI is concerned. But then there is also data related to the customers who are affected by that AI algorithm or by the AI solution. So protecting that data goes back to doing the fundamentals for any organization, be it healthcare, be it a financial institution, be it any other industry for that matter. It goes back to the fundamentals, saying do the basic hygiene as far as protecting customer data is concerned, and comply with what the regulations stipulate. Because every industry has certain regulations, like finance has RBI regulations, healthcare industry has their own regulations, pharma industry has their own regulations to protect the data.
But is it not a kind of a catch-22 situation? Because one, like you rightly said, we all need innovation.
Yeah.
And for innovation, through AI, we need data to be shared. At the same time, we do not want the data breach to happen to us. How do we bridge this?
End of the day, you benefit from the data. As I see companies like yourself, as data custodians. The actual owner of the data is still, as DPDP Act says, the data principal is still the customer. The customer owns the data.
Yes.
And the companies like yourself or any banks for that matter become custodians. And then
is it not a conflict? Because under the DPDP Act, one, there's a data protection which the company has to follow. On the other hand, you need to have some innovations in place where that data needs to be shared with a certain. So is it like we can segregate, we can look at what minimum data needs to be used?
No, I think this is a good point, because data minimization and consent management are two things that are very critical in as far as DPDP Act is concerned.
Sure.
So when an organization wants to innovate using data, customers' data, they obviously need that consent from the customer that they will be using.
And there is a provision in the DPDP Act where we can go back and ask for the consent on sharing them.
Yes, absolutely. And
so does that mean also the framework on accepting the consent also needs to be established for most of the companies?
Oh, all companies need to have it, I would say, because it is not, like I said, it is not if, it's when, right? When the government will actually crack the whip. It's better to bring in that consent management solution in place so that companies can be well prepared. And at the same time, it's also driving the trust of the customer, saying, okay, we are informing you that we'll be using some part of your data for this purpose. And at the same time, we will protect your data. That builds trust and the integrity for the company. I think the good thing about consent management is that if a consent is taken for a particular reason or a particular use case from a user or the data principal, if the use case changes, there is a requirement in the DPDP Act that you have to go back and take the permission again. And also the Act also states that the requirement of data minimization. So use the minimum data that is required in order to carry out the innovation. Do not, just because the data is available, an organization should not go all out and just use everything, all the available data.
So can we also have anything to do with the stress test we do on the data, that tomorrow, if there is a breach, how well we are protected? Do we fall trap into that dark web with some of the characters playing against the company? So is there something where we can simulate and say that in these 20 situations, you are 100% protected? In certain situations, this is where we see a challenge or a modification needed in the IT structure.
And this is where, again, I'll go back to my earlier point of saying having those data breach playbooks plays a very important role. And these playbooks should cater to multiple such scenarios.
Sure.
And multiple scenarios should also include requirements of data minimization, requirements of consent management, requirements of the data principle. How should a data fiduciary handle data? And where does a data processor stand? Because when you do these kind of simulation exercises, you also need to involve the data processors, because you may have a third party provider.
So are there certifications also available for these activities? Maybe overseas, if it's available, are we anticipating such certifications in India?
In the USA, if it is a healthcare industry, they have a mandate to comply with high trust. It is one of the certifications that they need to comply with.
Sure.
And if it is a publicly listed company, they also need to declare in their SEC filings, the Security Exchange Commission filing, that they do year on year, how they are protecting the customer data and how strong are their requirements.
Do we see more of those replications happening in India as well?
I think we'll come to that, because I think we as in India, as a country, will come to it, because it does not just stop with rolling out the DPDP itself, because we'll need more assurance to be provided to the customers, so that they can trust the companies are doing the right thing. That is one part of it. And also the other part of it is regulatory impact that not following such requirements has on companies.
Sure.
Like we briefly touched on the 250 crores as one of the fines. I'm sure any company that thinks about it, any senior management of a company, CEO or a CFO, looks at it and says, I would rather spend 2 crores in tightening.
Yeah, because it's a direct balance sheet exposure.
Correct. Absolutely. It hits the bottom line of a company, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And if it is a publicly listed company, the shareholders will ask questions as to why they have to bear the brunt for mismanagement from the the executive team.
Right. So Dhananjaya, one last word of caution for the companies, or what's your mantra on complying to the DPDP and also secure the data breaches?
I think start early. Don't wait. That's probably what I would say, because again, as I said, yes, it was DPDP 2023, but then it's 2025, and we are expecting the government to actually the hammer on the table, and say that, okay, now we are live. And then it'll be too late.
Sure.
So start early and start with all honesty to actually implement the necessary controls, and start talking internally, raise the awareness internally. And I'm sure this will be a much smoother exercise if it is started early, rather than waiting for the rubber to hit the road.
Dhananjaya, thank you so much for this rich and insightful discussion that we had. It really helps us understand as to what proactive measures as organizations need to take to protect, one, the data that they have and the possible breaches for tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining in.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure being here, and always fantastic to have a conversation with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And to our listeners, we bring to you more of the insights onto the cybersecurity, how we should manage our data, what tools are available, whether that's proactive or the reactive in nature. Till that time, stay safe, stay secure, stay transparent. Thank you so much.